So, yes, as was mentioned, I'm Alex Rainbow, and I am the Carbon Assessment Officer at Cornwall Council. Oh, come on, computer. We're there. We're almost there. Okay. Yep. And so, to set a bit of a context, in early 2019, Cornwall Council declared a climate emergency. I think we were the first local authority to do it. Not that we're looking for praise. But as part of that, we came up with a climate change action plan, and a part of that action plan was to reassess. So first of all, our aim is to become carbon neutral by 2030, but one of the specific actions within that plan was to redo how we revalue how we look at decisions that we have inside the council. And we chose to adopt Doughnut Economics as the model for how we value our decisions, or how we make decisions, and what values back that up. Now, for those of you who don't know Doughnut Economics, it was developed by the economist Kate Raworth, and what it basically says is that between the sort of social foundation, which is the minimum amount of resources that we need to be able to live comfortable, safe lives, between there and an ecological ceiling above which the earth cannot support our resource extraction, there is a safe and just space for humanity, and we have to look at decisions through this particular lens. And Kate Raworth had a series of indicators within that, things like ocean acidity and greenhouse gases, but also social justice things like access to housing. And we took that idea and decided that these would be the lenses that we would look at decisions through, and we would have to ask ourselves, in terms of each of these particular areas, whatever they might be, are we meeting? Are we aiming for a safe and just space for humanity? Are we not doing too much damage to the world, but also are we providing for the people that live in Cornwall? So we looked at the original set that were there, and we decided that we were going to adapt what was in there, which is a very global perspective thing in Doughnut Economics, to what local authorities' policy drivers were. What are our policy priorities? What decisions, what things do we have power over? Because there are some things that we just don't. And then to use that to test our decisions. So what we came up with was a tool that is somewhat reminiscent of the original Doughnut, but with the names or many of the domains changed, some added, some taken away. It still has very much the flavor of the original Doughnut Economics, but these are all areas that we had some expertise in and we had some control in, and which our policies, such as our environmental growth policy, which we've had for a few years, are reflected. So the first iteration of this is quite a basic tool. We just designed it in Excel. The actual tool itself is very, very simplistic, but what we spent time concentrating on was how to ask questions for each of those segments. So each of them will have a series of, one to six questions, about that much. How do we write questions which not only test any decision being made through the lenses of this particular wheel, but also that it's usable and understandable by people that are going to be using this. So the people who are designing projects, who are designing policies, who are probably not going to be experts in all of these things, even if they're an expert in some of them. So it's very easy to use, and that's the sort of theory behind it. A broad brush approach to look at any decision that we're making through this. We also came up with a very simple scoring system initially. Again, because the people who are using it, we wanted to give them something understandable and easy to use, but also for people who are making decisions, who in our council, we pitched this initially out for only the highest level decision. So once it would go to our cabinet decision-making process, these people are not going to be experts in very much at all either. Most elected councillors, bless them, are wonderful people, but they are not experts. So we wanted to give them something which is effectively an overview of the decision that they have to be made through all of these particular prisms, where we gathered what evidence we can to support our conclusions and our scorings. It's the first time that we've included many of these different areas, such as climate change, in our decision-making process. But we didn't want to just look at climate change. Even though it was developed by the climate change team, really, we wanted them to look at the wider, more holistic viewpoint that includes social justice as part of a general move towards a better society that is dealing with a changing world, not to forget social justice as part of that. There's a quick example on this slide here of where we've actually used it. We've used it across all of our cabinet level decision making since end of 2019, and that usually comes to about, I don't know, 10 decisions per month roughly that go through our cabinet process. As I said, it is a broad brush one, but what it does is it allows councillors to really focus in on particular issues, and if they need to, they can ask questions. And since all of the questions in there were developed by experts that we had at the council, it's because local authorities are a wonderful resource for a very wide area of expertise. We could effectively either have the evidence there provided by those experts, or we could ask the questions that the councils are asking to those experts if there was a particular area that they wanted to know more about. And this is really good in terms of stimulating debate and reframing our the way that we test our decisions. So anyway, here's a quick example anyway of how we've used it. There's a town in Cornwall, which I don't know how familiar you are, but it's called Hale. It's not exactly the nicest place, but it's right next to St Ives. But sometimes people end up in Hale if St Ives is fully booked. Anyway, so we had a growth area there, and that's basically an area of land that we've set aside to grow the town. And traditionally, the way that we approach putting in a housing development, say, is to simply parcel up the land, and then developers come in and they take different parcels of land and they build their houses on it. And we have some sort of we do have some level of strategic overview of it, but basically it's up to the developers to develop each lot. And when we tested it, tested whether or not to go ahead with a Hale growth area through there, and we looked at previous similar projects and we scored it through the decision wheel. We came up with what you see at the bottom there. There's a lot of reds, there's a lot of neutral impact, and some of it's good and some of it's not so good. So instead of doing that, we went back to change our process in how we look at, or how we allot areas for development. And we came up with the strategic orders for any development like this. And what it does is it means that we have to have a strategic plan for the site, and we take a lot more control over what goes in there. So instead of simply trying to get rid of all the reds on there, there are plenty of areas that we could also maximize. There we can do things, we can add better transport connections in there, we can allow areas for wildlife, allow areas for like parkland, for recreation, and we can have a much more joined up approach to how we actually develop a site. The wheel also reflects that there isn't really any way when it comes to development that we aren't going to damage the world in some way, and that's part of Doughnut Economics. That's part of how it is. Generally, if you provide for one area, other areas will suffer to a degree. And getting people, especially cabinet and especially project managers whose responsibility this is in there, to really look at the potential negative aspects of things, even if they can't do anything about it for the time being, it's what's really stimulating that conversation about how we do things better in the future. It's also a major cognitive thing for people to overcome, is understanding that something that they hold very dear, perhaps something that they want to promote, something that they want to build, their project, their policy, that it will have some negative effects. People find that very difficult to sort of get their head round. And initially, when we've been using this, we've been finding that people score it much more positively. And having myself and other experts in there as a sort of moderating force for using this tool, we're able to have those conversations with people from an impartial standpoint and say, have you considered this? Actually, when you do this, are you putting, for example, unnecessary pressure on our sewerage system? So the wheel is again stimulating those conversations at a lower order within the decision-making process. I probably don't have time to go through all the positives and negatives here, but But on the whole, it has been a resource intensive process, not to develop the tool initially, but to use it and to take people through the process of getting them to change their way of looking at things, to see the negatives, to be more pessimistic, because it is in so many of the negative things that we learn. But it has produced a lot of cross-departmental conversations, and it really is changing the way that we make decisions here. We do have a new version of it. Very quickly, I'll try and wrap up. We do have another version of it coming, which is a much more automated version. This has taken a lot of resource to do, but this will be much more accessible to people within the council, and it will be able to score internally itself. So instead of people simply saying, oh, I think this is a bad thing, it will actually score that for you based on some criteria that we've spent a while working out. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what we've been up to. It's one of I think only 150 actions or something like that were in our climate change action plan, along with all kinds of other things, lots of more renewables and lobbying government and changes to agriculture and building and development and sustainable transport. But this one has been the one that really has got to the heart of how we assess things and what values we use to do that. So thank you very much.